They will arrest you before you've had a trial without a grand jury indictment. They break the law completely. They put you in orange clothes and shackles, and nearly 3 days later, after they've held you in jail for close to the maximum 72 hours, they bring you before a judge, and he asks you, how do you plead? And your bar attorney will nudge you in the ribs saying, enter a plea, enter a plea, enter a plea. You absolutely do not enter a plea. And our cover cards teach you what to do and what not to do. You want to demand to see the verified criminal complaint, because most of the time the district attorneys give you a love letter about all these codes you broke. But the district attorney can't write a verified criminal complaint. They work for the government. They're not a real party of interest. A person, another citizen, has to pick up pen and paper and write a verified criminal complaint, and they can't prosecute you without one of those. And what they next have to do is they need to prove that you have act, intent, and damage, that there's probable cause for this crime. And if they don't have any of that in place, they can't prosecute you. However, if they get you to their court, they put you in front of their high priest in black knight, and he says, how do you plead? And he said, I'm not guilty, or no contest. They then say, you agreed to be prosecuted. Let's go ahead with the prosecution. It's now under contract. You've agreed to be prosecuted. You've entered. You've taken the hook, line and sinker. You've agreed to go and be prosecuted. And it's a trick these criminals are pulling. It's fraud. It's criminal. It's completely outside the construct of the United States Constitution and law and order and everything that's decent. And this is how our judges and our lawyers are building a criminal enterprise which has thrown so many people in this nation behind bars and been very profitable for the lawyers, the cops, and the judges. Thank you. They will arrest you.
Welcome, 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 ladies and gentlemen, to Burn the Corporate Fiction. That is exactly right. It is all administrative law, existing parallel to the Constitution, having buried common law by locking you into a trust indenture of your own estate. Essentially, they reduce you to chattel property and trustee of your own estate and place you under administration so that the bar pirate can play God. It's pretty much the simplest way to put it. It's the way the bar pirates usurp divine jurisdiction and allow them to actually judge living souls, right? But again, they have to pretend that you're not living. They have to pretend that you're just property, right, under administration. So today we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about, well, for instance, it does relate to current events. We have that young Ukrainian woman who was just unalived on a light rail, and the individual who had ended her life had been arrested 14 times before, but let out on a promise to appear, so just a signatory bond, personal recognizance, which is wild. And this is no accident, okay? There's a war being waged against us by the communist bar associations, who are controlled by the Inns of Court, who are controlled by the Crown Corporation, which is controlled by the Vatican, okay? It's the ultimate realization of the papal bull, Unum Sanctum. And for the sake of not being repetitive, because I talk about this all the time, I'm just going to sum this up simply. All right. Man cannot make law. Okay. Common law is not, or law is not written. It is written about. Okay. Man can only discover law. This is a fact. And the more that you learn about law, reading old treatises, especially on common law, read Blackstone, read The Heart of Blackstone, right? A treatise on the American law of administration from the 1800s. When you read back in the 1800s, this was common knowledge. You had law, and then you had everything else. That's why statutory courts are called inferior courts. Every other court, except for a court of common law jurisdiction, court of record, is considered an inferior court. Okay. And even the Supreme Court is not allowed to overturn the decision of a common law court of record, because once the jury decides, that's it. All right. The only thing that can undo a jury's verdict in a court of common law It's called a writ of attaint, which is, I know it sounds funny, but writ of attaint, which is where the person who has been found guilty will appeal to a grand jury to have the court of record case overturned. It's the only way that could happen, and it has to be done by the people. All right. So since man cannot make law, man can only regulate commerce and property under administration, which means the property of incompetence. Okay. They've gotten clever and figured out how to reduce you to property. And now, in the eyes of God, they're not playing God and adjudicating living souls. No, they're merely settling property disputes. And in God we trust. By the very use of the Federal Reserve notes and the Social Security number, you have consented to being chattel property of the corporate state. Okay. So I want to show you guys something. This kind of illustrates my point of statutory courts versus a common law court of record. So let's go here. This guy puts it pretty well.
Hey, back to the basics. Hey, God teaches people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. There's a reason why public school and colleges don't teach fundamental law, don't teach state constitutions, because they establish the relationship between the people and our servants and trustees. So here's Georgia Constitution, Bill of Rights. This is by far the hardest hitting constitution because it lays out that relationship. So let's read the text. Origin and foundation of government, all government of right originates with the people, is founded on their will only, and is instituted solely for the good of the whole. Public officers are what? The trustees and servants of the people, and are at all times amenable to them. So you ever had a government actor say, I'm your servant and I'm your trustee and I'm accountable to you at all times. What can I do for you, sir? No. These clowns sit back, they write legislation, they think they regulate your life, your liberty, your property, and tell us what to do. They got it backwards. That's why it's important to dig into the fundamental law and read the text, because people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. So let's dive into the next section of Georgia Constitution. Object of government. The people of this state have the inherent right of regulating their internal government. You ever heard that? That people regulate servants and trustees, they don't regulate us? That's the law, folks. Government is instituted for the protection, security, and benefit of the people. Are they benefiting you? Or are they writing bills that attack your constitutional rights, your life, your liberty, your property?
I have to stop him right there. They're not constant. Everybody likes to say constitutional rights. Okay. The Constitution merely enshrines something that existed before the Constitution. Those are your common law rights. Those are your unalienable God-given rights. Okay. The way that they have abridged the Bill of Rights is the 14th Amendment. Okay, the 14th Amendment, by its very nature, by the very nature of what that citizenship is, it is a trust, and it is it's a wardship. It's a trustee under wardship, because you have to look at who the 14th Amendment was created for. The 14th Amendment was created for newly freed slaves. Okay. And these slaves were unable to exercise common law rights and unalienable rights because they had been property. And as such, okay, they did not know how to provide for themselves. They had everything provided for them. Okay. So when you are dependent upon the state or any other entity for survival because you cannot sustain yourself, you automatically settle your estate with that entity. It's an operation of common law. This is why I explain to people all the time. Common law is like a hallway. Okay. It's just straightforward, cut and dry, black and white. Did you injure somebody? And did you violate your word? Did you honor your word? And did you injure somebody? That's it. Now, out of that hallway, there's a whole bunch of doorways where you can enter into the other jurisdictions of not law, but just court, right? Because it's not law. There is only one law. One of those doorways is administration. And administration goes all the way back to the Magna Carta and the the clergy courts of the early English after William the Conqueror, right? And what it is if you're not of age, if you die and have no will, okay, and your heir is not of age, then your estate comes under administration until the heir reaches, a lawful age. And while they're under administration, the courts can sell portions of the property. They can tell the heir what to do with the property. They can take rents and profits because it's an administrative fee, right? Okay, that's one way. The other way is being incompetent. So you've got some sort of mental defect. You're insane. You're a drunkard. You're a spendthrift. Something's wrong with you. Okay. You come under administration. When you are under administration, you are considered property of the estate under administration. This is how they circumvent that whole man cannot make law thing. So you are property when you're under administration. The other way you can come under administration is by being a pauper. And see, they've given us a trifecta here of presumptions. So one, you're presumed to be an intestate estate, whereas the IRS likes to call them decedent estates, okay, because you never claimed your estate by the age of 7 as one of we the people, okay? You just automatically use the account numbers and just, went through the way that the public school programs and trains you to be an obedient debt slave. The other way is pauperism. You have no access to lawful money. A promise to pay does not constitute payment, period. Okay. Commercial paper, like a Federal Reserve note, is not inherently valuable. In fact, the only time it would become valuable is when the obligations are fulfilled. Okay. And there again, the paper itself is not valuable. The obligation that is fulfilled is, whether it be pay this, amount of money or perform this task or whatever the case may be. So commercial paper is not money. Because you have no access to lawful money, you're considered a pauper by operation of law and under administration. And again, the 14th Amendment is the other way, because the benefits of privileges, immunities, and protection that daddy government offered the newly freed slaves are considered benefits. And the 14th Amendment citizen is a creature of the federal corporation. So automatically, by operation of law, as a 14th Amendment citizen, you come under the wardship of the United States Corporation. So, yeah, Sergeant Frogdog says slaughterhouse cases, 83 U.S. 36, 1872, primary holding, the privileges and immunities clause of the 14th Amendment is limited to federal citizenship rather than extending to state citizenship. Exactly. I actually have another one here. We have, let's go ahead and share the whole window. We have, let me see, which one is it? It's this one, Maxwell v. Dow. Okay, says the privileges and immunities of the citizens of the United States do not necessarily include all of the rights protected by the first 8 amendments to the federal Constitution against the powers of the federal government. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because 14th Amendment citizens are not we the people. They're not we the people. 14th Amendment citizens are public chattel property. Now, 14th Amendment citizenship is voluntary. All right. This is how the Bar Association has come in and transformed the entire de jure common law system over to a commercial corporate system. It was via the 14th Amendment. And then they included corporations in the definition of a 14th Amendment citizen. And then they said they're entitled to the privileges and immunities of the 14th Amendment citizen. And so they made this entity on par with corporations, which allowed the corporations to gain citizenship and that entity to never be able to stand in a common law court. It's one of the many ways, right? He is a trustee by nature. Morning, Pat. Good to see you, man. So it says right here, black and white. Now, 14th Amendment citizenship is voluntary. My longtime subscribers, you already know this, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. I'm just going to go over it real quick for anybody who may be new. Then we're going to get into the actual attorneys. But this is McDonald v. State, Indiana Supreme Court. Guy was found guilty, appealed the verdict because he said one of the jurors was an alien, and the juror was from Germany, moved to Indiana, naturalized within Indiana, but never became a United States citizen. So this guy tried to say, oh, well, he's not a U.S. citizen. He's an alien, right? Ninth, he's an alien. Okay, well, they denied his appeal because it says the evidence of bushing on his voir dire, which determines if a juror is competent to be a juror, showed that although he was not a citizen of the United States, he was a citizen and voter of the state under Article 2 or under Section 2 of Article 2 of our state constitution. One may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States. And in fact, it's a shitty deal to become a citizen of the United States because you take what you have already had, which are your unalienable God-given rights, right? Your right to property, your right to, well, we can actually sum these up very, very simply right here. So this is the Virginia Bill of Rights. This is from the Revised Code of Virginia, 1819. Fantastic document. I'll actually link it in the comments for anybody who wants to check it out. It's really good to read old law books so you can see the way things were and how they're supposed to be. But it tells you right here in the beginning of the Bill of Rights, it says that all men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights of which when they enter into a state of society, they cannot by any compact deprive or divest their posterity, which is your children or your children's children, which makes the birth certificate null and void right away. Okay. Coincidentally, they introduced the birth certificate right around the same time that the Civil Rights Act, which later became the 14th Amendment, was introduced. At least they did here in Michigan. And the reason being is because they wanted to create a title to the estate so that they could then collateralize that title and borrow against it. That was the only intention the entire time. That is the sole purpose of your birth registration. And to give you a legal entity identification that they can then create attachments to and generate their own obligations in commercial paper. Good to see you, Peg and Kevin. Glad you guys can make it. So it says that they cannot deprive or divest their posterity, namely the enjoyment of life and liberty. And then everybody knows, oh, in the pursuit of happiness. No, that's a stupid lawyer thing. That is obfuscation. The pursuit of happiness, sure, that's vague in general. Your actual common law rights are your right to life, freedom, especially freedom of locomotion, which the driver's license and motor vehicle code immediately violate. That's a way of training you into compliance and obedience, right? I think about that all the time. The motor vehicle code is such a strong and powerful way to maintain the grip of obedience and compliance on the public at large. Why? If you pull up to a stoplight in the middle of the road or in the middle of the night, you pull up to a stoplight, there's no cars coming either direction. You're in the middle of nowhere, but you sit there. You sit there until the light turns green. Why? Why do you do that? Right? Compliance. They have you trained in your head, your mind, right? And it's so frustrating. But anyways, your common law rights, your common law, life, liberty, especially the liberty of locomotion, the freedom of locomotion, property, most importantly, all of your rights are derived from property, except for the right to property itself, which is derived from God. But everything else is derived from property, right? That's how you exercise and express your rights, period. So what do I mean by that? Well, the word status is the Latin word for estate. Your status or status is determined by your relationship to your property. These communist bar pirates have reduced you to mere property of your own estate. So what does that mean? That means that all of your rights to whatever property you think you have are determined by that trust arrangement that you've been placed in. And that's determined by contracts, like your driver's license contract and the registration, the entire litany of things that come with that, and being required to obey the motor vehicle code. Okay, wearing your seatbelt, maintaining insurance on the vehicle because it's the state's property, right? You're not free then. You only have equitable rights to the property determined by contract, and you can only enforce those in a court of equity. And I really need everybody to understand the difference between law and equity, because in a very vague and generalized way, though it's more sophisticated than this, all other jurisdictions are equity jurisdictions for the most part, or military, right? Every other jurisdiction is an equity jurisdiction. So law deals with what is in fact, deals with living souls, deals with harms and wrongs, damages. Okay, that's what you seek at common law. Equity deals with fiction. Equity deals with contracts and trust arrangements, whether they're implied or express. And in equity, because it deals with fiction, because it deals with property, it's quasi in rem, right? Because it deals with property, the judge is allowed to play God, right? Because it's supposed to not have anything to do with the affairs of living men, as far as like whether or not they're going to have their freedom taken or their life taken or anything like that, because man cannot adjudicate that. That's why it requires a jury of your peers. It's about the closest thing our ancient jurists have found to being acceptable to pass judgment on another living soul, is a quorum of living souls. Well, rather a jury of living souls. Okay. So property is your most important common law right. Your right to acquire, possess, and protect your property. Your right to protect yourself and your family, and your right to contract, of course. Those are your common law rights. Okay. So the 14th Amendment, the bar associations, well, first of all, let's check this out. There shouldn't even be any bar associations. This, again, is from 1819, Revised Codes of Virginia. Okay. And did I end up I put it in the chat so you guys can check it out. This is the original 13th Amendment. If any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall, without the consent of Congress, accept and retain any present, pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign powers, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States. And at this point in time, that means as a citizen of one of the several states, because only the state could confer citizenship and should still be the only one who confers citizenship. And shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit. Offices of profit are welfare offices. That's where you take the paupers under administration. And I'll show you that in just a second as well. And shall be capable. So this original 13th Amendment forbade titles of nobility. If you had a title of nobility, you could not be a citizen of any of the states, nor could you hold an office, right? What happened to this? Well, I'll tell you, it was on the books for over 20 years. And then the Bar Association became so thoroughly entrenched behind the scenes that they were able to remove it without any just cause. I've seen so many different excuses of why it was removed. Oh, well, it didn't actually have the requisite number of votes to be ratified, so we pulled it out. Or new states joined the Union since then, and they didn't ratify it, which doesn't make any sense at all. Every excuse I've ever read is just bullshit. It's so see-through. And to suppose that this was a mistake, that this is in this law book and was in law books for over 20 years, to suppose that that was a mistake is to accuse the very generation of men who founded this republic of imbecility, of being morons. Right? You're talking about people that were the way smarter legal minds than you have today. Attorneys today are morons. They only know process of one specific small section of law. They have no idea what law actually is. And yet they think they practice law. They do not. Right? So you're going to accuse these men who actually did know what law was. You can tell by the fact that they wrote things like the Bill of Rights, like this. They understand deeply what law is. And you're going to accuse them of being mistaken that there was an original 13th Amendment? That's insane. And you'd have to be a moron to actually believe that. No, it's the Bar Association. It's the Inns of Court. The same pirates who have been trying to essentially banish common law the entire time. And when you really look at what that sentence means, banish common law, to bury common law is God's jurisdiction. Okay. I'll show you guys this real quick. This is the Heart of Blackstone right here. Oops, not this one, this one. And it tells you the common law is grounded upon the general customs of the realm and includes in it the law of nature, the law of God, the principles and maxims of law. It is founded upon reason, and it is said to be the perfection of reason, acquired by long study, observation, and experience, and refined by learned men in all ages. Okay. Right here, long study, observation, and experience, because they do not write law. They discover it, study it, observe it, experience its effects, and then they're able to basically philosophize be philosophers of it. That's it. They don't write it. And so when you go to a common law court, especially here in the Republic, there is no judge. It's a magistrate or justice of the peace. They have no power at all. All of the tribunal authority is in the jury and the plaintiff, the person who brings the action, respectively. Okay, because that is his court. He erected that court. That's why it says in the Magna Carta, no free man shall be deprived of his court. And every common law court of record requires a seal. That's why everyone used to have houses and seals. I have a house and a seal, and so do many of the members of the Jurist Society. And those who do not are working on it because it's absolutely necessary. It's prerequisite. That's your legal armor at law. That's what you do. You go represent your house against other houses and the state. Occasionally the state. The state's never supposed to have any authority over you whatsoever. That's a fact. So when we look at where we are now, how did we get here? Yeah, so Sergeant Frog Dog says he has his house and seal. Corbett says, Senator Tim Kaine wants you to believe that our rights come from laws and come from government, because what government gives you, government can also take. Exactly. And that is true for the 14th Amendment citizen, because the 14th Amendment citizen is a creature of government. You have to look at this. The people created the state governments. The state governments got together and created the federal government. Okay. And then the federal government created the 14th Amendment citizen. So the creature or the creator can never be controlled by the creature. Same way that you cannot control God. None of our creations are supposed to have authority over us. Period. So the federal corporation got clever and made its own creature called the 14th Amendment citizen, and then said, we'll grant you privileges and immunities and benefits. We'll protect you, little infant, in exchange for you coming under administration. Now, once you're under administration, you're regulated as property. That's the only way that they can make any rules that affect you, is because you are property by consent, by choice and consent. And if that's not true, change it. Change it on the record. It's about time that we stand up, because if we do not, they're building a digital prison right around us. Okay? And if they get that prison in place, we're fucked. There will be no challenging jurisdiction. There will be no due process. There will be none of that. And the bar associations will have effectively usurped divine authority, which is what they've always sought to do, because they're Satanists. You ever mention God to a judge? They despise it. That wasn't always the case. You used to have good judges, right? But judges, again, are only dealing with property, because at common law, you don't have a judge, not in this republic. So, for instance, in the Jerome Daly case, that judge was good. He got killed for it, but that judge was good. And he said, you know, this man put up his house as collateral, okay, put up his land as collateral, and the bank gave him nothing of their own, okay? Only God, and this is right out of the Jerome Daly case, only God can create something of value out of nothing. That's it. And only God can grant authority. And God has only granted authority to one. And that one is not part of the bar association. Period. Okay, so we'll look at this too, and this, of course, this book was written by a bar pirate, obviously. But what it says, so it's very vague in general. It talks about here how William the Conqueror just abolished England's form of self-government, right? And in favor of a highly centralized government. The ancient council, because before that, England was self-governing under common law. The 100 courts, which were composed of 100 families within specific areas, had more power than any other court in the realm. And that was controlled by the people. William the Conqueror destroyed that and then replaced it with feudalism. How did he do that? By reducing everyone's property under administration. How did he do that? Registration. The word registration comes from the Latin regnatum. Regnatum means to be governed. When you register something, you are conveying the controlling interest or the governing interest of that property over to whomever you register it with. You can see that with your automobile, because once you register it, the state wants you to put its name on the back of it. Same thing they do with your driver's license, because your property as well. So how did William the Conqueror do this? What he did was he had all of them register their land in the Doomsday Book. That made the king the superior controlling interest of all the land. And then he gifted the land back out under title, and those titles were subject to regulation. The 14th Amendment citizen could be considered a form of a title. Peasant. And it's subject to regulation. Right? So it tells you here the different types of jurisdictions that we have in the United States. It says the English judicial system was brought to America and became firmly established before the Revolution. It formed the basis of our present system, which is composed of various courts differing from one another in jurisdictions, methods of procedure, and in the nature of protection or redress they afford. Our system includes courts of common law, courts of probate, courts of admiralty, extraordinary courts, and courts of equity. Now, let me tell you something. I'm going to simplify this. You really only have courts of common law and courts of equity. Okay? Because once you come under probate, probate technically makes the decisions, but once you're placed as a trustee of the state, say once you come under administration, and you automatically become a trustee of your own estate, responsible for whatever obligations the administrator puts on you. And in order to enforce that, they're going to take you to a court of equity. Okay. They brought the law of the sea inland, especially with the Buck Act. Okay. And I've explained that in other streams. Courts of admiralty are combined with courts of equity. So it's a quasi in rem proceeding where technically, and this is how they created UCC and brought it inland, right? UCC is actually the law merchant, the international law merchant made modernized. That's all it is. And see, they can just make this shit up out of thin air. Man cannot make law, but they can regulate commerce and they can regulate property under administration. Good morning, Roger. Good to see you. So it tells you common law courts. There are usually 4 grades of jurisdiction with their separate tribunals in the common law courts of the states. These are justices of the peace, which have jurisdiction over all petty offenses and civil suits or trifling sums of money, right? The county court hears appeals from justices of the peace and from mayor's courts, right? Its jurisdiction is one step higher than that of justices. Civil cases involving considerable sums of money come before it, and some criminal cases. And then superior courts hear appeals from county, municipal, and all inferior courts generally. They have original jurisdiction of a general character in both civil and criminal cases. Okay. And then Supreme Courts have only ever been appellate jurisdiction. So no suit can be brought in the common law courts until the injury has been sustained. They afford no protection against threatened injuries. Their jurisdiction is limited and almost entirely to controversies between 2 parties arising out of a breach of contract or a dispossession of lands and goods, forcible or consequential inquiry of persons or life, and the like. Period. So there has to be a victim. Otherwise, you're not in a court of law. You're in a court of equity. You're in a court of equity, so the judge can play God. Now, I do want to mention this to you guys. We are going to go to Rumble here in the second hour because there's some stuff I want to share that YouTube would definitely strike me down for. So I put the Rumble link in the description, and we're going to head over there in probably about 20 minutes or so. And I got some pretty cool stuff, a lot of cool stuff to show you guys that I could never show you on YouTube. Jeff Bendewald, good to see you, man. He says FDR's specialty in law was admiralty when he worked for a law firm in New York. That makes sense. He was an absolute commie. FDR was an absolute commie. You have to think about this, what people are fighting over right now, especially when it comes to welfare. There should be no such thing as welfare in this republic, because in order to have welfare anywhere, you have to take from one at gunpoint or under threat of force to give to another. It's redistribution of wealth. Okay. In a common law society, nobody can tell you what to do with your property, and especially cannot force you to give it to someone else. But see, that's what the 14th Amendment is. It's a membership to a membership corporation, right? Where you all come under daddy government, under the doctrine of parens patriae, and daddy government gets to decide how to distribute wealth. Okay? And that might include raising your taxes. That might include you forfeiting your property. It's communism. That's absolute communism, is 100% feudalism. Period. So Peg in Australia, he said, a bloke in Victoria, Australia tried arresting a judge and a few cops in a courtroom. Desi Freeman. He ended up taking out 2 cops and is still on the run. It's going on now still. People are tired of it, dude. If you guys read the description in today's stream, I said, the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants alike. That's Thomas Jefferson. That tree has long been thirsty. And the reason it requires the blood of patriots and tyrants alike is because you have to be willing to die for your freedom, and you have to be willing to make sure other people do as well. So if you're not willing to do that, then you're not going to be free. Benjamin Franklin said, those who sacrifice the liberty for security deserve neither and will lose both. Well, they've created this artificial womb of society via the 14th Amendment, where daddy government promises to keep the infant nice, cozy, warm, and safe in exchange for collateralizing him and borrowing against him and placing him into debt slavery. Right? So people, that's why it says in the Declaration of Independence, men will suffer abuses while abuses are sufferable. Well, what did they do? They increased the sufferability through the bread and circuses. Okay, now that you have a smartphone, indoor plumbing, heating, grocery stores, all of these nice modern conveniences, abuses are a lot more sufferable. So they can push it much further than they could in the founders' time. They can push it much further, as we've seen over the last 5 years, which is something we're going to get into on Rumble, actually. So now you have Gideon. Right? Like that man was, I showed the video when we first started, he was reading the Georgia Constitution. And they said that it's not just the right of men to abolish the government when it becomes abusive and tyrannous. It's the duty of men to abolish the government when they become tyrannous. Now you have Gideon. What do you think Gideon's for? Well, Gideon's for identifying people that are freedom-minded, that are truly patriots, if you want to use that term, right? And target them as dissenters, as terrorists, as anti-government, right? It's behavioral threat analysis. It's pre-crime technology. They're going to see a stream like this. They're going to see you watching it, and we're both on a list. Well, we're probably all on a list right now as it is. When are we going to stop this? When are we going to stand up? When? It's almost too late. I say this all the time. The motor vehicle code is the front line to freedom. I shared this with the jurists the other day, so I will share it with you. What is the very first thing that you want to attack when you are confronted with the road pirate, other than him probably, right? Or the judge? What is the first thing you want to attack? What is the nexus by which they are able to enforce all of this administrative law against you? The 14th Amendment. So I'm going to show you how to attack the 14th Amendment real quick. I showed you McDonald v. State, right? Here's another one, Black's Law, 4th edition. If you can get your hands on one. Now that the federal government has federalized archive.org. Sorry, I thought it was already on the definition. We'll get to it though. Now that they've federalized archive.org, I can guarantee you that a lot of stuff like this, like the old Black's Law dictionaries, the old law books, the old congressional records, Senate report from 1973, all of that stuff, right? It's going to go bye-bye. They don't want you to have access to this stuff. They don't want you to know how they're illegitimate fraudsters and pirates. They don't want you to be able to challenge the jurisdiction of their courts. That's the very first thing you do. The very first video I showed today, the guy said, if you plead in court, then you're giving them jurisdiction. That's a fact. If you do anything other than say, I'm here by special appearance and I'm challenging this jurisdiction, then you've already lost. Because if you're going to try to argue why you can travel or why you can do anything in the court, the judge is God, because it's a court of equity. And in the court of equity, the judge is God. Blackstone says so himself. Bouvier says so himself. Equity is the law of tyrants. It's what it is, because it's supposed to deal with property disputes and trust arrangements, contracts. So it's supposed to be all fictional stuff. So the judge is allowed to leave everything up to his conscience, not a jury, not the people, right? It's what Thomas Jefferson had warned about. You turn every judge into a legislator. So the 14th Amendment, here, you want to print this page off, became part of the organic law July 28, 1868, and its importance entitles it to special mention. It creates, or at least recognizes for the first time, a citizenship of the United States as distinct from that of the states. McDonald v. State again. One may be a citizen of the United States, or one may be a citizen of the state and yet not a citizen of the United States. What's up, Hempcrete Bear? Good to see you. Yeah, so Peg says they're trying to call them sovereign citizens in the media and et cetera, right? Because what they've done is they brainwashed the public into thinking that's a conspiracy theory, into thinking that people who know this are crazy. And so now they're just trying to dissuade the public from looking into it any further. They train cops to be violent towards people who stand on their rights because they're not cops. They're Roman centurions. They're pirates. They're the same as the Roman centurions who nailed Jesus to the cross. They're just following orders. That's it. Okay. So this McDonald v. State's something you want. And then this congressional record, 1967, right here. Whatever loads. It's June 13th, 1967, page 15641. You want to print this out. The 14th Amendment, equal protection law or tool of usurpation. Okay. He's talking about how our unelected federal judges read out prohibitions of the Constitution of the United States by adopting the fuzzy haze of the 14th Amendment to legislate their personal ideas, prejudices, theories, guilt complex aims, and whims. The 14th Amendment turns judges into God because it places you as a trustee of your own estate, as I said, right? And you can only adjudicate trusts in equity, which everything's left up to the discretion of the judge. When it's said that something's left to the discretion of the judge, it signifies he ought to decide according to the rules of equity. Okay. The discretion of a judge is said to be the law of tyrants. It is always unknown. It is different in different men. It is casual and depends upon constitution, temper, and passion. In the best, it is oftentimes capriciousness. In the worst, it is every vice, folly, and passion to which human nature is liable. That's why they want you in equity, because they can enforce their conscience in equity, right? So this right here, this is why you have to be independent of the government. It tells you in section 36, as every free man to preserve his independence. This is Pennsylvania Constitution from 1776. Just so you know, section 36 says, every free man to preserve his independence, if without sufficient estate, which means you can't survive on, your investments or anything like that, right? So ought to have some profession, calling, trade, or farm whereby he may honestly subsist. There can be no necessity for nor use in establishing offices of profit. What is an office of profit? It's a welfare office. Okay. It's called an office of profit because they take someone who cannot take care of themselves. They make them productive. They give them a portion of their productive value in the form of benefits, and then they take an administrative fee out of it. They also have complete control over the property of the pauper. Okay, so says the usual effects right here, the usual effects of which are dependence and servility, unbecoming free men. That's because when you accept benefits, you come under administration, you must be servile to the will of the person on whom you depend. That's even Blackstone says that. He says, man, considered as a creature, must necessarily be subject to the laws of his creator, for he is entirely a dependent being. A being, independent of any other, has no rule to pursue but such as he prescribes to himself. But a state of dependence will inevitably oblige the inferior to take the will of him on whom he depends as the rule of his conduct. That's it. This is operation of common law. It takes you out of common law, puts you under administration. But it is an operation of common law. This is why the Magna Carta provides for this. Actually, the Magna Carta provides for the whole framework of administration, which is why Michigan compiled laws 1929 if it ever loads. Come on. There we go. It lists the Magna Carta right there as its origin of jurisdictional authority. Before the Declaration of Independence, before the Constitution, it's the Magna Carta. Why? Because the Magna Carta in the first 5 articles sets out the structure for administrative law, right? Which is the regulation of property. So I hope you guys are seeing how this all goes together. I know the members of the Jurist Society are able to see this because they're probably tired of hearing it at this point. But if you're new to this channel or you're still not quite getting it, dependency breeds servility, and it also allows them to control you as property. There's no other way to put it, right? So when you're attacking the 14th Amendment, which is the exact nexus that they're able to enforce this stuff on you. So it says right here, it says, judges will try to say all persons born in the United States are 14th Amendment citizens because of this line, all persons born or naturalized in the United States, but they forget the second line, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Okay, the only way you become subject to their jurisdiction is by agreeing to it. You have to establish that you are subject to their jurisdiction. You've got this, and you can tell they want you to be subject. They offer you privileges and immunities and protection, right? But then they tell you the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. Why is that? Because they planned on borrowing against you. Right away, they planned on borrowing against you. Right? So this right here, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Let's look at a couple things. You've got Michigan Motor Vehicle Code right here. So this is what the hell is this? This ain't, well, that wasn't what I thought it was. Hold on. Bear with me for a second. Did I close that one? No, it's right here. Okay. Resident. Resident means every person who resides in this state and establishes that he or she is legally present in the United States. That's subject to the jurisdiction. You have to establish. When you look up Black's law definition of establish, to establish is to create, to form, right? Or to what's the other way he puts it? To create, to form, or to confirm, right? Something. And in order to do that, that's all consent. It's all agreement. It's all contract. So you have to establish that you're legally present in order to be a resident, because a resident is actually a foreigner. Okay, we go here. This is called elementary lawsmith. What's chat? What chat blocked? What are you talking about, Sergeant Frog Dog? No chats. I haven't gone over to the Rumble side yet. So if you're chatting with me on the Rumble side, I'd have to use a unique RTMP, because otherwise it just gets all wonky with the way Rumble's got stuff set up. But I look at the chat on Rumble side once we cut over to Rumble, which will be about in 10 minutes. So this right here, the reason that resident is defined that way in the Motor Vehicle Code is because this is elementary lawsmith from 1933, one of the very few treatises on law that's actually decent after 1933. It says right here, the members of a state. So let me see if I can find it. There we go. A member of a state may either be a citizen, occupying the status entitled citizenship, or he may be a resident alien, occupying the status. Where the hell is my mouse? There it is. Okay. Occupying the status titled residence. That's a resident alien. A citizen is a permanent member of the state, owes its allegiance, and is entitled to permanent protection whether he's at home or abroad. The status of his membership, citizenship, is distinguished by its permanent and personal nature. Okay. A resident alien, on the other hand, is a person residing within a state other than the state of which he is a citizen. Okay. The status, the status of his membership, residence, is distinguished by its temporary and local nature. That's why you never hear any state governor go, Michigan citizens, Virginia citizens. No. They say residents. This is why. UCC 9. Let's see, where is it? I got it up here somewhere. Right here. UCC 9-307, location of debtor, will tell you under subsection H, the location of the United States. The United States is located in the District of Columbia. So if you're a United States citizen, but you live in Michigan or you live in Texas or something, then you are a resident of Texas, but a citizen of the District of Columbia, subject to Congress, no common law rights, all equitable rights determined by the trust relationship you've entered into. So that is that, right? You want to be able to prove this stuff to the road pirate on the side of the road, though he oftentimes it doesn't have the intellectual capacity to understand what you're saying. And then you want to definitely be able to prove it in court when you challenge jurisdiction by special appearance at the very beginning of the proceeding, and never, ever, ever acknowledge their jurisdiction. This is another good little piece to have. This is Senate reports. This is a marked up version, but you can find the regular versions. 93-549. Says last two. Oh, really? So you did. Second was 54 statute 178, specifically about the sovereign citizen. I didn't block it, man. So that's YouTube's on some bullshit then, because I can't. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. You're more than welcome to share whatever information you want in the chat with everyone else, because I can tell by what you say, you know what you're talking about. So this right here is a Senate report that confirms that since March 9th, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency, and really since the Civil War. In fact, there are now in effect 4 presidentially proclaimed national emergencies. And now you see Trump did like 3 different ones. So the last thing I'm going to say on YouTube before we cut over to Rumble, and if you guys are on YouTube, the link is in the description of this video on YouTube. You can click the Rumble link and head over there. We're going to go over there in just a couple minutes. Last thing I want to say about this is this martial law thing that Trump's doing, right? So he's declared war on crime, literally. Okay. We've already had that once before, and it's always got to be some war on some unwinnable war against some inanimate object. Like, where's crime's headquarters? What country does crime come out of? Right. How do we get the top generals of crime? You don't. Right. It's always these vague generalized enemies so that they have an excuse for militarizing society. Right. Unlimited militarization of society, because you don't win the war. It's an inanimate object. Right. So Trump declaring war against these crime within these cities. Like, I don't know if you guys seen that Shapocalypse thing he just posted, where it's a picture of him like Apocalypse Now. It says Shapocalypse. And then you've got the gang members in Chicago going, okay, bring it, Trump. We're going to show you why it's called Chirac. And both sides are equally ridiculous and stupid, because all of this could be solved quite simply. Stop regulating people's ability to protect themselves. If an armed society is a polite society, that's a fact. An armed society is a polite society. criminals think twice when they know that they might lose their lives, that they're not just going to be able to jack somebody or mug somebody or do whatever they want to do. An armed society is polite society. So if they would stop trying to take guns, because what happens when they take guns? Well, Peg can tell you, Peg's place can tell you over there in Australia, they become communists and start forcibly violating your bodily autonomy, locking you up for Facebook posts and all that shit, like in England, right? That's what happens if you give up your guns. That's 100%. The reason they don't push it that far here in the United States is because we still have ours. They do not have a monopoly on force here. In fact, we have the superior force if people would just quit being cowards. That's what we really need, is for people to quit being cowards. Pat says the crime headquarters is the Pentagon. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess it is. I guess you did locate a headquarters there. It definitely is the Pentagon. If Trump doesn't need to deploy the military on Americans. No, he wants to, because that's the forerunner to Gideon. You know, well, I'm going to get crime under control in these horrible Democrat-run cities. And then once, which Democrat-run cities are off, Republicans are pieces of shit who don't do anything to stop what is going on, and only aid really what's going on, right? Forever wars and all the dumb shit. They're just as complicit as the Democrats, but the Democrats are ideologically insane openly, and their cities are pretty bad. So he's going to be like, hey, I stamped out the crime in these Democrat-run cities. Now we need to make it permanent, make sure it doesn't come back. We're going to implement Gideon software, predictive policing, right? And then just wait until the police become robots, right? Now there's not even a possibility of a conscience you could appeal to, or any kind of rationality. It's just a cold, lifeless robot following orders. This is what they want to set up. They want to make this permanent because they know that their time is short. We're waking up too quickly. So, good morning, Eddie. Glad to see you. All right. Well, since you're here now, Eddie, and everyone else, you guys want to head over to Rumble. The link is in the description of the video. And in fact, I'll go over. Let me put a link in the chat just in case. So hold on a second here. Whoops. Rumble. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't have one already on deck, but all right. Share. All right, I'm going to put this in the chat for you guys. Paste. And I hope to see you guys over there, because now I can actually get into stuff that I like talking about this stuff, but this is about all I can find safe to talk about on YouTube for the most part, because they're gunning for burn the corporate fiction for sure. Shadow ban and do all sorts of, like, taking Sergeant Frog Dog's comments off before anybody can even read them. That's kind of wild too. I almost wonder if it's an AI algorithm or something that does that. Like, how could any human be that quick to be able to take comments off of a stream before anyone else sees them? It has to be some sort of AI algorithmic thing. But all right, we are shutting down YouTube, so I hope to see you guys over on Rumble. YouTube, see you later.